It's a big, wide, wonderful world with just so much to see and do. Autumn is a wonderful time to be in the Northern Hemisphere, especially in France. This series of videos about central and southern France tries to show that country and its beautiful countryside the way it really is. From Paris we travelled south and then had 4 wonderful days in the Rhone, and now to explore Périgord we will travel southwest towards the Spanish border and base ourselves for 6 nights at the village of Ayen near Brive-la-Gaillarde, a perfect location to visit the ancient caves of Lascaux, dramatic Rocomadour, which we will do in this video. We are now headed for Rocomadour, and we have some decisions to make about how we gain access to this very hilly site.
And see if there is anybody who wants to take the lift down.
This is our first distant view of Rocomadour as we head towards the cliff top. Well, this is Rocomadour from the top of the hill, but it's afternoon, it's the wrong time of day. It's the morning shoot. Despite the western sun shrouding so much of the detail on the buildings, it is still a magnificent sight with all those astonishing structures plastered against the hillside all the way from the river bank right to the hilltop. But now let's look at all these wonderful buildings as we wend our way down the steep staircase from the top to the town below. We could have taken the lift, but we all elected to take the long, tough climb down. It certainly was steep, and you really do wonder at the ingenuity of the builders way back when they plastered this climbing footpath onto the cliff face. I suspect that if you ask today's engineers to build such a staircase, they'd simply say it just can't be done. You could almost look down the chimneys. Just think about the thousands of pilgrims of the past on their pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela in distant Spain, who would stop here en route and climb these stairs on their knees while saying their rosaries. Finally, the station at the foot of the escalator at the halfway mark, and the point where the second escalator starts to take you down to the township itself if you wanted to, rather than walk as we intended to. Going through the tunnel to the sanctuary of Notre Dame de Rocomadour, you are now in the heart of the pilgrimage, to admire, to contemplate and to pray. One marvels at the fact that construction of these amazing buildings began as far back as 1166. You can sense the feeling of anticipation in the excited voices of all the tourists gathered here, waiting for the tours of all the various chapels to commence. This means an open area for the church. The way these buildings are plastered onto the cliff face is absolutely astonishing. Still a most important holy shrine, as well as a popular tourist destination, Rocomadour's site on a rocky peak above the Alzou Valley is quite phenomenal. We had an excellent English-speaking guide, but unfortunately her voice was a trifle thin and didn't carry very well above the huge background noise of the large number of people present. Where possible, I will try and give some sort of summary over her voice to try and convey some of the things she tried to tell us about Rocomadour.
So my co-team Saint Amadou gave the name of the town. It is called the Rock of Amadou, and the Rock of Amadou comes from the Latin about 10 meters under the floor. So you can see by this two chapels that at least, so that's why they put it directly on the cliff. And these two chapels are also very important because with them the pilgrim couldn't see the town, and the town for him means temptations. And with this road we can remind a lot of problems, like a lot of dangers like stealers or animals. So like that, with these two chapels he couldn't see the town, this road, and he could consecrate himself to his aim, and his aim is pray to Virgin.
This 12th century Roman church dedicated to Saint Amadou has remained practically intact, despite some minor restoration undertaken in 1974 to clean the walls. It is divided into two unequal spans by an immense transverse rib 2 metres thick. The diagonal arches, which are veritable reinforcements to the vault, are supported by columns set into the wall.
And the solidity of the building, so a solution are diagonal arcs in this building. And at the same here there was solutions. So this one is just an example. We will see over this later. And the crypt is all consecrated to Saint Amadou, the famous intact body that they discovered in the 12th century. So today there is nothing in the crypt of Saint Amadou. There is nothing at all. It has been totally destructed. So first, when they discovered it at the 12th century, they put this body in a very big reliquary. Imagine there was an intact body inside, and it was a reliquary in silver and in form of church. And first they put it in the Our Lady Chapel because the crypt was not finished. But when it has been finished, they put it very fast here because it was only a servant of Mary. So they didn't want them to be equal, not in the same building, not at the same level. And you can see that Our Lady is placed at the first level, very well protected by the cliff, whereas Saint Amadou is only at the third one.
This basement cellar without daylight, as it was known, was the only heated room in the priory. It was used as a work and reading room by the monks.
And there was only one opening, the one in the walls. There was rainwater and also...
The only light which enters the chapel comes from these quite remarkable original stained glass windows.
It is inside, it is on the second, and it serves also for the pilgrims. And the pilgrims to take water, it was outside.
Notre Dame Chapel is the heart of the pilgrimage and the ultimate destination of all pilgrims.
At the 15th century, and there has been another reconstruction at the 19th century.
The wooden shrine of the Black Virgin dates from the 12th century. The infant Jesus is seated on her left knee and both wear a gold crown of recent date. Her robe is straight and narrow with finely worked gold bands around the wrists and the neck. The present altar dates from 1889 because little remains of the original chapel of the 12th century. Successive damage and restoration has transformed it over the years. The building was destroyed by a rock fall in 1479 and was rebuilt by the Lord of Tulle. You will note his coat of arms on a tympanum at the entrance door. In 1562, the chapel was pillaged and set on fire by the Huguenots. The vaulting had to be rebuilt. Finally, weathering caused by time and many religious wars over the years led to complete restoration undertaken by the Abbot of Chapelle in the 19th century, which had doubled the height and length of the chapel. The south wall, with its door, is all that remained of the original construction. Finally, the St. Sylvia Basilica, which is accessed by a staircase situated above the St. Amador Church. It is the largest building of all the sanctuaries. The basilica actually dates from 1297. The arches of the impressive vaulting rest on two enormous pillars of 8 columns. The design of the wooden rostrums dates from the 19th century.
They have passed by a cemetery, and in this cemetery they marry most closer to the sanctuary in granite, so here was an intact body, and the main reason was...
On the outer wall of St. Michael's Chapel, the fresco of the Visitation and the Annunciation are harmoniously separated by 3 blind arches. Protected by the advancing rock, they are remarkably conserved, especially as we know they have not been retouched since the 12th century. Discovered here, in a cleft, in 1166, was the perfectly preserved body of St. Amador.
Took place in the Pyrenees, give up of his sword, because he didn't want it to go in the hands of his enemies. So it is said that to give up of his sword, he threw it in a ravine. And the ravine was so large, about 300 kilometers, that the sword came in Rocomadour. So it's very difficult to believe, but sometimes they added that it was the Archangel Saint Michael, Alzou. So here you can understand this legend, but has also magical powers. And it's for the young girls or for women that are not married, because it is said that when a young girl touch
the entrance gate to St. Amador's tomb. The remarkable frescoes of death, one holding a shroud, the other a star. 1970 was the 7th centenary of the death of St. Louis, who with his mother Blanche de Castile and his brothers Robert Alphonse and Charles came in pilgrimage to Rocomadour on the 1st and 2nd of May in 1244. The legendary Durandal sword, supposedly hurled by Roland, Charlemagne's nephew, into the rock face to protect the Notre Dame of Rocomadour.
Right, you have a Visitation, on the left, the Annunciation, and you can see this roof is very beautiful.
This badly damaged and partially erased fresco by Roulet represents St. Christopher carrying the infant Jesus. The presence of St. Christopher protects travellers and pilgrims from dangers on the road.
But today you see only the half of St. Christopher, the other half has been disrupted by a fall.
These frescoes are in truly remarkable condition. when they haven't been retouched since the artist painted them in the 12th century. Finally, St Michael's Chapel. This is the highest of the Rocomadour sanctuaries. It is set into the overhanging cliff which serves simultaneously as a wall, an arch and a roof. Protected by the rock, the chapel has remained practically intact since the 12th century.
And it's the best example of the adaptation of the construction to the cliff. Because here the cliff is the wall, but it's also the roof. It goes very high. And it's a chapel from the 12th century. At this period, the cliff was very well integrated to the Romanesque architecture because they even put paintings on it. And there is another characteristic of the Romanesque architecture, this vault, the form of this vault. And the fresco is also a Romanesque one. And on this fresco you can see two themes, two different themes represented. The first one is a Christ in Majesty, represented in what we call a mandorla, and with the four evangelists. So here you can see Saint Mark and Saint Luke. They are playing music, and over him you can see Saint Matthew and Saint John, and they are writing on stone tablets. And today we can place these evangelists because formerly their symbols were represented. Each evangelist has his symbol. But here, like in the Our Lady Chapel, there were candles, and these candles were always burning on the altar. So it has disrupted a lot the fresco, and certainly the symbol of the evangelist. But formerly, near Saint Mark, there was the lion, near Saint Luke, the bow, near Saint Matthew, the angel, and near Saint John, the eagle. And there is another theme represented, the Last Judgment. And the Last Judgment is on the left, with Saint Michael. And Saint Michael is weighting the souls. So like that, you can see that he has a scale. So he is trying to have his souls after the purgatory for them not to go with the devil. And on the right there is another element, an angel with 6 wings. There are two behind his back. An angel with 6 wings is called a seraphim because even in the angels there is a hierarchy. So you have the archangels like Saint Michael, the seraphims and the cherubims. And today the most beautiful chapel is reserved to the people who has taken the guided tour, but formerly it was they arrived at their aim, and when they arrived in the Our Lady Chapel, each pilgrim prayed at his own manner. So in these pieces of wood we are going directly in the halls, think about a bell tower or a post of observation. And if you look on this side, at the second level, you can see the trace of a door. And this door was going outside the two, post of observation and bell tower. Of Santiago de Compostela, Santiago de Compostela, it's the shell. The shell. For represents Our Lady, like we can see in the his arms against his mother. So like that, it gives a more protective aspect to Our Lady. Yes. If you want, we are going to go.
Outside, we pan down the magnificent bell tower to the steps leading from the town below, and sweep around the rooftops of this fascinating town, where the houses merge so seamlessly with this wonderful cliffside shrine. One can understand why it was such a compelling stopping point for the seekers of God on their pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela in far distant Spain. We were privileged indeed to share something of the experiences they found in remarkable Rocomadour. A final chat and farewell to our knowledgeable guide, and it was then tourist tap time. as we descended through many levels of quite steep staircases right down to the town below. All the way down to the lower town, the magnificent structures of Notre Dame de Rocomadour towered above us. More steep stairs gave us a glimpse of the other side of the valley. Beautiful. They sure were steep. But at long last we were right down to the main drag, and it was time for a refreshing sorbet.
Vanille, fraise, chocolat, citron. Vanille,
Oh, God help that. For you? This from section, I'll catch up with catches up now. Merci, madame. Merci.
You enjoying it?
It's strawberry. Yes.
Beautiful umbrella.
Yes.
Good.
There's a particular Sicily painting I keep
Walnut liqueur. It was excellent. We did in fact visit the distillery later, and it was really great to see it being made. Good value at $20 Australian. A great range of sausages with mushroom, with wild boar, with duck, Cahors wine, walnut, and just plain sausage. Daylight was now fading fast. It was 5:30 in the afternoon. Just enough time to check out the vineyard outlets for the great wines of Cahors, and away through the 8th century gateway of Figueres to leave the old city of Rocomadour. Our visit had been a real highlight of a fascinating week in Périgord, an astonishing insight into the medieval pilgrimages of the distant past. But for now, it's farewell, Rocomadour.